Hey everybody, welcome to Improv FAQ. I'm James Quesada, and in this episode, we're going to talk about making active choices. What makes a choice active? Why is it so important? And how do you get into the habit of making active choices? In improv, active choices means making choices that lead to action. In other words, making choices that can be physically expressed. Or in other words, find ways to do things in the scene. Ideally, finding ways to do things that support what's going on in the scene. Yes, and through actions and behaviors. Why is that important in improv? For a couple of reasons. For one, because theater is a heavily visual art form. And yet, unlike most forms of theater, improv doesn't really do much to dress itself up for presentation with costumes and set pieces and elaborate light design. Making active choices helps our improvised scenes to be visually engaging and avoid what we call talking head scenes, where the improvisers are pretty much stationary and exchanging witty lines of dialogue, and sometimes the dialogue isn't even witty. Making active choices makes it so that we are doing active activities, actions, acting like actors. Another reason it's important to make active choices is because it encourages improvisers to overcome fear and uncertainty. Standing still and saying things is a very safe place to be, and in improv, it can often feel like you're surrounded by tripwires and the best thing to do is move as little as possible. But more often than not, the best thing to do is to move and move into the unknown and engage in the undefined space of the stage in order to define it and create the environment, the backdrop, character behavior, and the tone and mood of the occasion. How can you get into the habit of making active choices? The best way to get into the habit of making active choices is to first focus on the active part. Here are some simple ways you can generally be more active in a scene. 1. Establish where. Make it your job to establish the location where your scene is taking place. You might establish it verbally by saying something like, "Oh, the artwork in this museum really speaks to me." Or you might suggest the environment physically by looking around in a really inspired and mesmerized way. "Oh, probably at a museum or somewhere with art. Oh." Number 2, touch 3 things. Whether the environment is established verbally or physically, try to explore the space of the scene enough to interact with 3 things in the room. Don't worry at first about how you use the things that you interact with. Just get into the habit of interacting with the space. Number 3, initiate scenes with object work. This will help you get comfortable leading with physicality. And you might hear a suggestion that makes you think of object work to initiate with at the top of a show, or maybe you have an idea of where to take the show in the next scene, or you might have no idea what you're doing or why, but you start doing some object work nonetheless. Either way, it's fine. You're either going to be translating ideas that are already in your head into physicality, or you're going to start with physicality and let that inspire ideas. Both ways are great. Number 4, gesture a lot. This might sound silly, and it definitely is, but focusing on over-gesturing can do a lot to open up possibilities. And I promise you, if you play with gesture, you will see the power and simplicity of physical behavior. Eventually, you'll want to tone it back down and make things more nuanced, but you might as well ratchet it up first. Number 5, move before you speak. This is a great way to challenge yourself to make some kind of movement before you deliver your next line of dialogue. If you're sitting, stand. If you're standing, take 2 steps toward your scene partner or 2 steps away. Cross the stage, move toward the door to exit, but then stop and deliver a line. Even just turning toward or away from your scene partner can be enough. There's a saying in acting that says, "Move with a purpose," and generally that is great advice. Normally it would mean having a purpose and then move. But while you're building a habit for making active choices in improv, you should be prepared to move first and find purpose later. Again, focusing on these things is initially about building good habits. The next step is to use these habits effectively and deliberately. And if these habit building tools are not enough to guide your instincts, or you're more of an analytical learner, try this. If you know what's going on in a scene, you've found the game, you have a sense of your character, the relationship you have with your scene partner, etc., ask yourself, what can I do to show that? How can I demonstrate what I think is true here? If you're thinking, oh, I think we're playing like these corporate greaseballs, how can you show that? What can you do? Count your money, be preoccupied with your phone, light up a cigar? Just remember who you are and what's going on is about more than just titles. And what I mean by that is your character might be a plumber, but it doesn't mean it's useful to break out a wrench and some PVC pipe to prove that. It might be better to show that you like to work with your hands by fidgeting with the table in front of you to see if it's level. If in your scene you're celebrating a birthday, yes, you could sing the birthday song and bring out cake, but how do you feel about the occasion? Not a fan of birthdays? Maybe you sing real monotone and roll your eyes and shrug your shoulders. Or maybe you go pour yourself another drink. If you're feeling nostalgic, crack out the camera and try to get as many pictures of every combination of people at the party. Probably the most straightforward application of making active choices comes when you are presented with options in a scene. Someone draws a sword and you can either back down or duel. Definitely draw your sword and duel. If you are trying to move a pile of books and you can either use the dolly or pack them up in boxes, maybe do neither and instead carry them by hand in a single stack of books and drop them along the way. What games do you play at the party? Is it going to be Monopoly? Nope, it's going to be Twister. But specific examples aside, in my opinion, the most important thing is that you're finding ways to just condition yourself to be generally active and more physical in your scenes. By doing that, you'll be able to see more possibilities in each moment of a scene, and you'll have an easier time translating ideas in your head into something physical and conveying what you think is happening in a scene into actions and behaviors. That's it for this episode. I hope that you found it valuable. And if you did, give this video a like. Also make sure you hit that subscribe and notification bell. You can also leave a comment if you have follow-up questions about making active choices, or if you have suggestions of other questions that you would like to have answered on Improv FAQ.